Now, on to Kim. Are you ready, Kim? Yes, she's ready. Kim grew up in overseas in New Zealand, Fiji and New Guinea because her father was a civil engineer building roads and bridges in those countries. And those foundational years gave her great insight as a minority living in a very different culture to that of her family. She came to realise how important it was to feel included in varied settings such as school, sport and friendships. Whilst working in the early childhood field for over 30 years, she's had opportunities to experience a variety of early childhood settings, including long day care, preschools, and as a child development officer at a number of family day care centres. During these years, she's been involved with implementing changes to the REG guidelines and practices and has adopted best practice approaches towards inclusion. Kim is currently the Senior Inclusion Support Facilitator for the Include Me team at Big Fat Smile, and she's attained great job satisfaction as she worked closely with educators and watched them make changes to their practices as they strive to build their capacity in providing an inclusive environment for all children. Welcome, Kim.
Hi, thank you. All right, this is going to be a real speedy delivery, so there's so much to cover. So this is an inclusion support agency's perspective of inclusion. Okay, so the focus of an ISA is that every child has the right to participate in the program. Oops. Okay, the role of the ISA. The guidelines state there, I'll let you read it out, but basically it's to provide practical advice, supports to eligible early childhood and services, to build capacity and inclusion. So we all know what inclusion looks like. As you can see from the model, it's where every child is able to participate. Inclusion is not one-on-one support. It's not providing individual activities within the room setting. Inclusion is implementing experiences that all children can be part of. So how do we become inclusive? Well, as you can see, there's a lot of things to be considered. We need to look at the contributing factors. We need to work together to reflect on our practices, the setting, the resources that we're presenting, our program, our routines, our expectations. And once we do this, inclusive practices can grow. We need to consider our educators, their qualifications, their own experiences, and what is their perspective of inclusion? What does it look like to them? We need to identify the barriers. We need to look at our service program, our routines, policies, even our physical layout of our rooms. And we need to look at, again, educators' beliefs and attitudes. The child, we need to identify the child's strengths, their ableism, their developmental level. Identify the child's needs. How do they communicate? How do they play? How do they engage with their peers? Communication. Good communication is imperative to inclusion. We all know it. This is where a bicultural support worker can help in providing and building connections with families. And we also need really good communication within the environment. Support frameworks. We all know them, and they're there to promote reflection and assist in embedding those inclusive practices in your educational setting. Professional development can be delivered in many ways. Today, our conference, what are we taking away from today? Through networking and webinars. Strategies and supports. ISAs can support educational services in accessing support funding for the additional worker, access specialist equipment that may be required, bicultural support workers, provide practical advice, current information, support strategies, assist in developing visual routines, or just be that person for you to kind of get a bit of a chat about what's happening and reflect. Louisa discussed visuals and the importance of it. Oh, sorry, I've gone too far. So visual supports. This is just an example of now, next and then to assist a child in processing what's happening in the room. I had a service, they weren't using any visual supports. They did have 2 children from a CALD background. They had a child with autism who had limited verbal. The director said that she didn't really need it because the child had some verbal, so she couldn't see the point of using visuals. But after some discussion, she said she'd give it a trial, although she didn't think it would make much of a change. So after a few weeks, I went as a follow-up visit, and the feedback was, I'll just read what she said, the children required less verbal cues, the children were referencing the visuals throughout the day, in general the room was more settled, and the children were actually telling the educators what's next, which shows that the children have a sense of belonging. And at that service, they were actually using the visual supports in every room. Request for inclusion support. So generally we're contacted when there's a need, but we can also just get calls. I got a call last week from a service that just said, the room is totally nuts. I have a child who's a T-Rex all day and has other complex behaviours. So it can be lots of requests for lots of different reasons. And again, it's talking about strategies and capacity building. Okay, include me goal. Educators need knowledge and confidence, and it's about changing the environment rather than the child. So better putting supports into that environment so the child can be part of the group. How do we know when a child's included? So it's when a child's enabled to participate, no matter whether they're from non-English, have varied abilities, complex behaviours, they're able to make choices, have a strong sense of belonging, where the program, the books, puzzles, songs, photos, stories, home corner resources, the games, craft, are all offered that reflect culture and abilities daily. Inclusion is knowing they belong, sharing respectful relationships, and providing daily group experiences that honour diversity. Okay, here we have Isabel. She was a child that was starting at a service. The service were very nervous. Isabel has multiple diagnoses and has severe developmental delay. She's non-verbal, has mobility issues. So we had to adapt the environment, make changes to the program. The parents were really nervous about her starting. Anyway, after a few weeks, the parents were overwhelmed when Isabel was able to produce her first painting, and the mum burst into tears because she was enabled to participate in every part of the day. Here we have, she's playing hairdressers. She's just part of the group. And the director stated that she is welcomed like a rock star. She's invited to all the birthdays. And she has brought to the service compassion. Children have learnt to be empathetic, to be helpful and to be kind. And the group see her as part of their group. And that to me is inclusion. Inclusion is knowing they belong and have a strong sense of self. This is where the bicultural support worker can assist and can provide wonderful supports. Also encouraging bilingual. Inclusion is walking into a setting and the child is part of a group and is not easily as identified as having a need or being different. So as we can see from this angle, Dougal has mobility issues. He's non-verbal. He's not able to sit without assistance. He's not yet crawling or standing. He's 3 years old and he's from a cold background. So a lot of things needed to be considered when we wanted to create an inclusive program and an inclusive environment. Here we see he's being a typical 3-year-old grabbing the chalk from his friend. I also wanted to share another story. I went to a service. They had a new educator that was starting there. She knew there was a child in there with autism. I'll just get a drink, sorry. Anyway, that educator said, "Oh, I can see the child with autism. He's the one over there pouring sand on someone's head." I said, "No, actually, that's just being a typical 3-year-old. The one with autism's over there rolling on mats with 4 other friends, having a wonderful time." And again, he wasn't easily identified. He was included. So inclusion is building on what we know. It's about reflective practices. It's accepting resources, developing support strategies and adapting the environment and experiences so all children can participate to the best of their ability. So I'll go back to what I started with. Every child has the right to participate, and every child has the right to participate in the program, and it's enabling them to do this through changing the environment and not the child. Thank you.